Welcome to the Golden Mike podcast, where personal growth simply isn't enough. I'm your host, Mark Cordone, a positive psychology coach, a do-gooder from the island of misfit toys who founded the Joy Revolution. Each week I'll wrap with an extraordinary guest doing extraordinary things through their own revolutionary work to talk about the ups, downs, and all-arounds of life. It's my mission to provoke and empower you through increased joy and inspire you to spark your own revolution to change history for the better. Welcome to the most serious happiness podcast in this multiverse. Welcome to the Golden Mike podcast. I'm curious about this. The feeling the feelings all the way to completion has been something that we've talked about kind of organically, you know, on the show. It's also in the show notes to talk about it, which makes it perfect, but there's no explanation there. Mm-hmm. And what I really like is that now we've gotten to this point in the show where we've been talking about our stories and you've been telling me to fuck you and all the shit. I'm sorry, Joe Fern. You're gonna have to do a lot of editing or no editing at all. This is a perfect podcast, actually. But it's not. But it's and. Uh-huh. How does it look like to feel your feelings all the way to completion? How do you know that it's actually at completion? And I think there can be a lot of illusionary, oh, hey, look, the black cloud is turned gray. It's not black anymore. I'm at completion, right? Yep. Or, I don't know. I'm not sure what the litmus test would look like, except for just your gut is telling you it's gone through completion.
So this too is from the Conscious Leadership Group. I really love their work and what I have learned from them. Can I just put a framework around it, and then I can, if you want, explain? It's really a 5-step process on how you feel your feeling through to completion, so I can take your listeners through it. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So the Conscious Leadership Group, they have written a book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And I talk about this a lot because I freaking love it, and it's been so useful and helpful in my both in my coaching practice as in my life. Mm-hmm. And the authors, Jim Dethmer, Diane Chapman, they start the book by saying they have a very simple and incomplete model for what a conscious leader is, and they draw a simple horizontal line, and they say a conscious leader. No, let me start with the 15 commitments. Let me get back to the model. A conscious leader, in their definition, is not someone who honors all 15 commitments all the time. That would be really impossible and exhausting to do. And they define honoring the commitment or committing to that commitment as being above the line, or when you're not honoring that commitment, you are below the line. So their definition of a conscious leader is not someone who is above the line all the time, but it's someone who has an awareness at any given moment, whether they are above or below the line.
I like it. Good stuff.
Cool. Here's why I like it, right? I'm a recovering perfectionist. I've always tried not to take up space. I have tried to do the right thing, quote unquote. And in this model, I have permission to be unenlightened, which was huge for me when I heard that. There's 15 commitments. I won't go into all of them, but commitment number 1 is I commit to take full responsibility, so 100% responsibility or radical responsibility for my role in any situation. That doesn't mean take 95% responsibility, right? So all the stuff that I talked about very comfortably in this podcast, but not the part that hurt, right? That would be taking 95% responsibility. And it also doesn't mean take 150% responsibility. So everything that I did in my past relationship plus 50% of what my then wife did. right? So taking radical responsibility means I take 100% responsibility for my actions in this situation.
Even when someone is taking no responsibility.
Yep.
Even when everyone around you is taking no responsibility.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's only one part.
You can own 100% of your shit.
Yep. And if nobody else owns it, great. That's their choice.
That's their responsibility, not yours.
They are allowed to be unenlightened. They are allowed to be below the line. That's why this model is so powerful.
Gotcha.
So commitment number 2 is I commit to curiosity. Commitment number 3 is I commit to feeling my feelings all the way through to completion. And there's 12 more, which we won't go into at this moment. So how do you feel your feelings all the way through to completion? They have such a simple, 5-step process, and they differentiate 5 core feelings: fear, anger, sadness, joy, and sexual feelings or creative feelings. And so step number 1 is, what am I feeling out of those 5 core feelings, right? And I said earlier that I was experiencing some shame around the topic that we were talking. So shame could be a combination of anger and sadness, right? So within that simple model, I'm experiencing anger and sadness. Mm-hmm. Step number 2 is try to locate those feelings in my body. And I can tell you I'm feeling that in my chest. So my chest feels a little bit constricted. My throat feels a little bit constricted. Mm. Step number 3 is I take a few breaths into that. And you heard me just taking those breaths, right? Mm-hmm. Step number 4 is, can I allow those feelings to be there? It's a yes or no question. In my case, the answer is yes. If the answer is no, I can't allow those feelings to be there, great. Then you're not committing, you're below the line, you're committing to not feeling your feelings all the way through to completion. And that's okay. You're allowed to do that. In my case,
so that in and of itself isn't that's a choice.
That's a choice.
It's turning something that is not a choice that you would think is reactionary into a choice, a conscious choice to say, I'm not allowing it.
Yep. I'm not allowing it to be there. I'm resisting it.
Cool.
All right. So question number 1 is, can I allow them to be there? My answer, yes, I can allow them to be there. Can I accept them to be there? Yep. Again, for me, the answer to that is yes, I can accept them to be there. Third question, can I appreciate them being there? And the answer there is, a little bit reluctantly on my part, I would rather not have them, but now that they're there and the awareness that I gained through this conversation, I can absolutely appreciate them being there. So then step number 5 is, now that you've localized them, you know what they're doing, is there a way that my body wants to express those feelings through sound, movement? And when I say sound, I'm not talking about telling you how I'm feeling. That's recycling that feeling, right? It's not about knocking on your neighbor's door and saying, let me tell you, I feel so sad, combination of sadness and anger.
The sound is, fuck you.
So actually, yes, maybe, right? But no, the sound, and I'm actually standing, you can't see this, but I'm actually standing and I'm shaking my arms and I'm just letting out this sigh or a growl or whatever it is, right? It's not a conversation. It is just letting it out. And then what I'm experiencing right now is that something is shifting inside of me, right? Instead of that tightness around my chest and my throat, I'm feeling something shifting, coming from my belly, and there's a little bit more flow. And I might have to do this process a number of times to really feel my feelings all the way through to completion.
Gotcha. So this is freaking cool. I love how you can take consciousness and put it in a stepwise way, a form of practical application. That's hard to do, man. And then the second thing is also sort of like paying attention to some of these outcomes, right? You're talking about shifting internally, and then I'm wondering if is the ultimate outcome, especially if you're like well, it's not really outcome because it's just permission to be, or insight into whether you're above the line or below the line.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time is how much of feeling your feelings all the way to completion associated with a feeling of release. Like instead of something shifting,
Mm-hmm.
something is moving in from inside of you
Mm-hmm.
to outside and gone.
I'm confused. What are you asking?
Yeah, so like when I asked you about the idea of feeling your feelings all the way to completion, like what does that? How do we know it's at completion, right?
Okay.
And I think it's a very hard litmus test,
Yeah.
and but also at the same time, like one of the markers could be you feel this shift happening, right?
Yep.
Like your throat isn't as tight anymore, your
Yep.
heart, your chest isn't as tight.
Yep.
That's sort of a movement on the inside.
Yep. Completely.
Right?
Completely.
But also, so you call that a shift.
Yep.
So what I would call a release is when you feel something from the inside, like literally just move out of your body, escape your body. Is completion shifting and releasing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
The conscious leadership group actually calls this a shift move, so that you shift from below the line to above the line. So, and yes, me expressing that sigh and that movement that you didn't see, but it was me shaking my arms and shaking my hips, and that is a shift. That really is a shift that I experience. Or no, that really is a release, right? And then I felt the emotion shifting. So the physical sensation, the feeling, the physical sensation in my body, going from being predominantly in my chest and my throat, going to me feeling something around my belly, but me making those sounds and that movement, that's the release. And if you were to see me from before I stood up, I was sitting straight in front of the computer and sitting very buttoned up, if you will. Whereas if you see me now, I am way more relaxed. I'm leaning into my chair. My legs are crossed. I'm as if we're having a conversation the way that you and I typically would when we're like physically close together and there's a beverage in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How much have you released about your anger towards your biological father?
A lot.
Yeah.
Do you want me to share about that? It's a cool story. There's two of them.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Yeah.
And you know what's coming because we've talked about this. Are you? Is that what you're?
Oh yeah, this is like hearing one of my favorite songs when you talk about this.
All right. Cool.
This is some crazy ass fucking modality here.
It is.
For release.
Yep. So, after I got really serious about just saying, okay, I'm done with showing up as a victim, right? I want to take responsibility of my life. I want to take ownership of my life. I want to lead my life rather than it passing by. That's when I think things got serious. And in terms of my healing journey, and I've been working with a therapist. Now
this was after the first plateau, right?
Oh, so plateau happened when I was still living in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And then as I moved to Chicago, that's when I got into a depression. That's when I also, like, someone suggested that I was depressed, that I took horrible offense at. But after probably about 3 weeks of processing, that's when I got more serious into like finding help. And then the turnaround point was when I broke my hand, and I was like, okay, I'm in therapy, but now I'm really showing up.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of work with my therapist, who's brilliant, around healing, around finding my voice, if you will, around a lot of those things, around being able to show up. But there always was this fear inside of me, and the fear was I hadn't heard from my biological father since I was 2 years old. And my biggest fear was that at some moment he would someone would ring the doorbell. It would be my biological father. He would say, "Hey, Andres, I'm your father. And I would not be able to contain my rage. I would beat the crap out of him, not to kill him, but so that I could, and he would be laying on the floor, and I would step over him and walk away in the same way that he walked away from me. And it's almost poetic and drawn into one. Yeah.
And I mean, this is something that you played over and over in your head.
Yeah. Over and over and over. It was, sickening, to be honest with you.
Well, it's, now it's sickening, but given the memories that you've had and the feelings that you've had, it might make sense that you would play that in your mind. But why was that? Why did you identify that as your biggest fear, though? It seems as if that would be this release that would get you to a next level of processing, like truly letting go.
You're so right, and I don't have a good answer for that. I'm curious if maybe any therapist on the show can explain it to me. Because
I'm not a therapist on the show.
Hey, you said this was going to go through the multiverse, so
this will go through thousands upon millions of therapists listen to this and are educated by me every day.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, because you're right, intellectually, I agree with you. It seems like that could be cathartic. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Cathartic. Yeah, and it's almost even in the way that you talked about it. It was like, I almost wish it would happen.
Yep.
I wish he'd show up.
And yet it doesn't feel that way. It feels like something scary, and potentially because for all those years. Okay, here I'll tell you my own awareness that I've had right now. Because it wasn't the adult man speaking that could land a punch. Because it's the 2-year-old kid speaking that says he's going to hurt me again.
Yep, absolutely.
Crap, man.
Absolutely.
I got to send you a check for $150. This is a therapy session.
Well, I mean, it's really good insight into sort of the fractured inner child, right?
Yep.
And the part where the child is fractured and feels most abandoned is what shows up in their subconscious.
Yeah.
I think you're doing great work, man.
Yeah.
And I take PayPal, as you know.
Okay. Good
okay. So you're working with the therapist, and you tell him about this fear.
No. Okay. We've been working together for a while. I hadn't heard from my biological father in 38 years, and this happened in January of 2019, so now almost a year and a half ago. And I get a call from my mom, and she explains in a lot of detail. She tells me that my biological father is still alive, that he showed up on the doorsteps of his paternal home in Chile. And this is where a lot of detail comes in. At the end of this 30-minute conversation, she shares with me, and he died this morning. So on the day that I found out that he's still alive is also the day that he died. And for me, that was a relief, because I knew that my worst nightmare was not going to be able to happen. This biggest fear that I had would not happen. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I feel anger. And I'm not angry, but I feel anger. I feel this emotion in my belly that is incredibly powerful. For 3 days, nobody messes with me. And nobody messes with me typically. But now I'm taking up space. Where I said earlier,
I know, that's exactly what I was about to say. I was like, someone's taking up space.
Yeah. Like where I said earlier, I was not taking up space when I was a little boy, and even perhaps in my relationship. Now I'm taking up space. I'm taking up my entire square meter, and maybe then some, but at least my entire square meter that I'm the king over, right? And I'm at that moment still seeing this brilliant therapist. And I'll put a plug in for him. Like, he sees people remotely. So if you need someone who's brilliant, after you listen to this, reach out to me. I'm happily refer you to him. He, in that moment, is working in Chicago, and I reach out. I have an appointment with him on Tuesday evening. So Saturday morning, I learn my biological father died. I'm experiencing all this anger without being angry, right? I'm taking up space. On Tuesday morning.
So you know it was anger, though.
I know this now. And I knew this then as well, because here's the email that I sent to John, to my therapist. Tuesday morning, I email him and I say, John, I'm experiencing all this anger. I have to do something physical.
Mm.
And so I show up 8:00 p.m., his office, and he's got a background in martial arts. And we've done some physical stuff in the past as we're working together to release some frustrations. And he checks in with me. He said, you sent me this email this morning. I got it. Do you still want to do something physical? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He says, great. Give me a couple minutes. He comes back. He says, okay, come with me. And the office right next door to where his therapist practice is a personal training studio. And he, so I at this moment, I'm working in a suit and a tie and all that thing. So I take off, the tie had already taken off. I take off my iron shirt. So I'm in these dress pants with a white t-shirt underneath. And there's one of these big tractor tires leaning against the wall. We put it on the floor together. And first I start pounding that thing with something like sledgehammers. Then he hands me a pair of boxing gloves and I'm talking through and I'm punching. And all of a sudden he tells me, get inside the bathtub. And so this big tire turned into the bathtub and I am scared. And I don't want to. And he lovingly talks me in it. And
so you literally are seeing that as the bathtub.
I am like emotionally, I am seeing that as the bathtub emotionally. I see that it's not a bathtub, but emotionally it feels like a bathtub.
Okay. So it sounds as if this is part of your inner child showing up.
Oh, absolutely.
Right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I'm still have my boxing gloves on and I am sitting inside the bathtub, but now I am boxing my way out of it in a way that as a 2-year-old, I couldn't do. So I reclaimed that power, which explains so much of what we were talking just minutes ago. Mm-hmm. I reclaimed that power that I didn't have as a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself was transformational. Then he asks me, how much of the weight I'm carrying is not mine? And I say 100%. So basically I'm carrying my own weight and I'm carrying my body weight on top of that. And he says, which weight is that? I'm like, that's the weight of my biological father. Okay. And he grabs one of those big ropes that people use to swing. I don't know how to explain that without, but big ropes, big ass ropes.
Yeah. The swing ropes. Swing ropes. The big ass ropes. That's actually better English than most Americans can call it. Right. The big ass ropes. Yeah.
Gotcha. So he grabs one of those. He ties it around my waist. And he says, okay, I'm going to lean in. I'll be the weight of your biological father, and your job is to get rid of me.
Christ.
Yeah.
I just don't know how many client hours does he have to do to get the certification to do this to you, man? I mean, this is some ballsy therapy.
It is some ballsy therapy. And he does a lot of physical, like, not physical therapy as in kneading in you. No, the belief is that there are emotions inside your body. You can talk through them, but you can also express them.
Sure, in the same way that art, you can do that through artwork.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So he ties this cord around my waist. He hangs behind me basically, and I start moving. And for the first 45 seconds or the first minute, I think that I'm winning because I am making progress by moving forward. And this is such a symbolism of my life at that moment. The idea that I was living my life 1 foot on the brake. I was living my life with the weight, my own 200 pounds, and the 200 pounds of my therapist behind me.
So is at the time, were you feeling as if this is what freedom feels like for me to move forward with all this weight behind me?
At that moment, Mark, I thought I was winning because I was moving forward with all the weight.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to check up on, because you had said winning, and I was like, it's a lot of weight to carry.
It's a lot of weight, but I thought
Yeah.
I was like, just because I was making progress, I felt really good. And in that moment, he will say a different word, but I will say he started verbally abusing me, which is absolutely not what he did. But he reminded me, I'm your biological father. I will never let go of you unless you break free. And that's when the anger kicked back in. And at this moment, I didn't care if I killed him, but I was going to get rid of him. And so I tried smashing him into a wall. There's a pillar in the middle of the room. I tried smashing him in there. Like, I picked up the pace. Like, this is anger at work. And then
he's still not, was he encouraging this? Was he saying stop?
He wasn't saying a thing. He was just like trying to keep up.
Okay.
And then I step in the bathtub, right? So this big tire that's in the middle of the room, that's a bathtub. I stepped in the bathtub, out the bathtub. He trips and I'm free. I feel that release, not only from having had probably like 2, maybe 2.5 minutes of exercise, right? But I feel the release of I broke free from my biological father. And that for me was a transformational moment.
Now, how much of this was an internal piece versus like giving you permission to, like, did you completely break down at that point? Was it just surreal? Because I mean that seems almost cinematic, because it's so surreal that kind of release there.
So I didn't break down. That didn't happen until way later, that I'm happy to share about as well. But it just felt like such a release, and instead of the weight that was lifting on my shoulders, I just felt lighter, and so much lighter, and I had more. Literally, as if I could see more light in the room. Like, everything became lighter from that moment forward.
How much have you felt the anger or something similar ever come back since that moment?
So that day, my relationship with, or probably the day that I found out that my biological father died, combined with that day, my relationship with anger changed. Right. And so basically in those 3 days, my relationship with anger changed from being something that is not okay to feel to it being neutral. It's not good or bad. It just is. It can be a powerful force. It depends what you make it mean, what you do with it, whether it's good or bad. So my relationship with anger changed and turned into it's okay for me to be angry. Where really for 40 years, it was not okay for me to be angry, to experience anger. So now I can say, dude, I'm pissed off, I'm angry. Yeah. Whereas before, that would have been absolutely not okay. And maybe I would have said it, but there would have been this feeling of, it's not okay for me to say this. It's not okay for me to feel this.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I don't want to make the assumption that everyone feels this, but I have a small subset of students and clients that I've worked with, and from the subset of clients that you've worked with, and maybe friends and compatriots and stuff, maybe they haven't had to jump into a tire or a bathtub in order to experience a release, but how many people do you think are living a life in which they think they're winning at life, carrying all this bullshit with them, and they think it's illusionary winning? Yeah. How many people have never actually experienced the release? And so I'm curious. I mean, do you still feel as if you're sort of this person that is kind of like, I'm the only one with this monster. I'm the only one kind of walking around like this. I'm kind of a loner.
Yeah. So the short answer is not at all. And there's 2 reasons why I give that answer. One is the moment that there's more to this to this story, right? So one.
Well, that's for the sequel that I'll be starting.
Exactly, the sequel where you too
you
will
battle
be
robots,
and you will be paid handsomely. So one was for me to be okay to feel anger, and the second one is for me to release that anger so that I wasn't experiencing that anger every time that we talked about my biological father.
Yeah.
And so that really was the sequel. But so why do I say not at all? It's because at this moment, Mark, and it took me a long time to get here, I can honestly tell you everything that I've experienced in my life, but particularly around my biological father, has made me into the damn good coach that I am today, has made me into the man that I am today. Mm-hmm. And that's someone that I am. I look in the mirror and I'm happy to see myself. And that's really what I wish for everyone, is that they can look themselves in the mirror and say, you know what? Yep, I'm glad you're here. Mm. And instead of "you disgust me," which was a message that I often said to myself, right? It wasn't okay for me to be there. It wasn't okay for me to be. So
you wouldn't change anything?
At this moment, that's my answer. Didn't always feel that way, but at this moment, everything that I experienced happened for me and got me to this point.
Yeah.
And that's powerful to be able to say that, right? And believe me, a year and a half ago, so before I found out that my biological father died, and up until the moment that I released that anger, that maybe we should, to complete it for your listeners, we should talk about as well. I was fighting that because even after that session with John, with my therapist, I now was angry at my biological father. And even the idea that any of what I experienced happened for me, I was like, you're crazy. You're insane. It was unfair. It was totally uncalled for. He had no right. And I would get very righteous, but also very hurt.
Sure. So it sounds as if still like it was like justice wasn't served for him. It wasn't cool what happened.
Correct.
And something should have been done.
Yeah.
To equate the shit that he put me through or something. Yep. You know, someone should have smashed his ass and stepped over him like he did to me.
Yep.
And he left peacefully or something like that. I don't know how he left.
He didn't.
He got to leave in his home.
He didn't. There's more there to share.
Right.
But no, there is. But definitely it was not okay for him to treat me that way. And I say that in a pretty neutral tone of voice at this moment. But really, a year ago, this time, I was still angry. But it was okay for me to be angry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, a year ago, I remember meeting with you in Atlanta and having coffee and talking about being above the line and below the line. So I remember you being like super, super, super charged up about that choice that you can choose to be Un-Enlightened if you want.
Yeah.
You know, was it that 15? Was it the conscious? What is it called? The conscious folks leadership program.
The conscious leadership group is what they're called.
Yeah,
in the book.
They put you over the top.
No.
So there was. So you're still angry with the conscious leadership group? Still.
No,
not with the conscious leadership group, but you're still angry. You still had anger with your father.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell the sequel to this?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Hey, it's Mark. I hope you're digging the Golden Mike podcast. If you have or are just starting your own revolution fueled by joy, there's a site I created for you. If you, like me, believe that personal growth is simply not enough, if you, like me, are committed to changing history for the better in both micro and macro ways, check out joyrevolution.com. In there, you'll find an archive of our over 200 Golden Mike Live Facebook shows, and of course, our podcast that you're currently listening to. Check out the blogs highlighting how positive psychology and joy theory apply to your everyday life. There's even some cool clips from our Joy Revolution course geared towards influencers, speakers, writers, and change agents. It's all there. Go to joyrevolution.com. That's joyrevolution.com. Let's get back to the episode.
So the sequel to this is that months after John and I had that session in this personal training studio, John tells me, he says, I got something to tell you. And he says, I realized that I have helped so many men pursue their dreams. And I came to the conclusion that I'm not pursuing mine. And I decided to leave Chicago, go to Taos, New Mexico, and start my therapist practice there. And the reason I'm going there, one is I love the place, but two, there is a horse ranch where I can do equine assisted therapy. So horse assisted therapy there.
Please tell me he wasn't fucking with you. Like he wasn't doing mind fuck stuff to you to like
he was dead
stir
serious.
up abandonment.
He was dead serious.
Are you serious? Okay.
Dead serious. And he said in that moment, or maybe because I think he gave me like a 3 months notice, if you will. He as part of our conversation, he said, look, I would like for you to come out to Taos and experience this equine assisted therapy. And he said, I've got two reasons for inviting you there. One is that I think it could support you in your healing. And two, I know that you're a coach, and I'm curious for your perspective on what we could do as like in this ranch with like your knowledge and expertise. I'd love to hear what thoughts you have around that. I'm like, okay, cool. And so in May of last year, I went to Taos, New Mexico, and I spent a day and a half on the ranch, and I worked with 3 different horses. If you have never done this, let me tell you a little bit about what it entails. I was there a day and a half. The morning of day 1 and the afternoon with day 1. The morning I worked with one horse. In the afternoon, I worked with another horse. And the morning of day 2, I worked with a third horse. And what working with a horse means is that I spend about 45 minutes or so, maybe half an hour, brushing the horse. And so really taking care of its skin and interacting with it. And the thing with this particular horse rescue, is that they only take in horses that have had a traumatic experience. So they only take in horses that have been traumatized in one way. And the first horse that I work with is called Scout. And Scout is an older horse. He has had a very good life, minus the 2 years that he had before being brought into that horse sanctuary. And in those 2 years, he got incredibly malnourished. He broke a leg that wasn't properly taken care of. So he came in apparently as a bag of bones, and just with a broken leg that wasn't properly taken care of, so he couldn't run anymore.
Oh.
And because he's an older horse, he's had the experience of that people are good. So he had a rough stint, but all in all, he's a very trusting horse.
Yeah.
He's also a massive horse. I'm going to say 1,300 pounds. I think that's accurate, but don't quote me on it. And so I'm there with John, my therapist, Ruth, who owns the horse rescue sanctuary. And she is there to, on the one hand, to take care of the horse, if you will. John is there to work with me on the therapy side. But I had also invited Ruth, or Ruth was welcome to be part of my sessions with John so that they could both learn from it. That was kind of the deal that we started. I was okay with it, or maybe I suggested it. Like that's the trust that I had in John. Right?
Nice.
So big horse, friendly horse. I don't have a lot of experience with horses. I'm standing in this stable, and all of a sudden I have a horse's head like 4 inches away from my head, just saying hello. And it's this magnificent animal.
Yeah.
And so I start taking care of him, and he is interacting with me in the sense that he's letting me know what he appreciates by moving around. You can see, and Ruth is explaining this to me, it's like, you can see that he's appreciating because you see his muscles relax in his shoulders, right? And you can see by the facial expression that he's making that he's appreciating it. Mm-hmm. She also shares with me that horses don't have a like or dislike for people. They just react to how it is that you show up.
Right.
So in that sense, they are a mirror to how you show up.
Yeah.
So really cool. So I show up in a certain way, and that gets reflected back to me. So I do work with Scout, that was his name, for 45 minutes or so. Then we go in and we debrief, and it's a really rich conversation. Then we break for lunch. I work with another horse. That horse had the same owner as Scout had. So the last 2 years of that horse were also underfed, needed to have surgeries for sinus infections, and
but also an older horse.
But not an older horse, a very young horse. So she has had, like, pretty much the first years of her life were miserable. So you can see that she is not trusting of human beings. They had not been with the Equine Spirit Sanctuary for that long. Mm-hmm. So there's still trust to be built. So I do the same thing with her. I take care of her, of her skin. So I brush her with 3 different brushes. That's basically what I did. And she doesn't move, right? So she is just catatonic, stoic, if you will, until I brush her and I take, 6 steps back. And that's when she relaxes and shows that she's appreciating it. And you can see those same back muscles relaxing. Mm-hmm. And Ruth shares with me, you know what, she is appreciating what you're doing. She's just afraid to show it in that moment.
Sure.
So I approach her again. I do more of that. And then I take my steps back, and she, like, you can tell that she's enjoying it, and you get the reactions from her.
Yeah.
So again, do that for about 45 minutes. We go back inside and have another conversation, debrief. It's incredibly powerful and insightful. I can highly recommend this. As part of that afternoon, we also go visit Cisco. And Cisco is the horse that I do some work with on the second day. Cisco doesn't like people. So Cisco, when you approach it, he tries to bite you. And what Ruth shares with me is that he was 4 months old when his father almost trampled him to death. And the parallels between Cisco's story and my story, I'm imagining you're seeing those. Mm-hmm. So I get apparently a little bit too close because he tries to chomp at my leg. He doesn't get my leg, but he does try it. And the next morning, I show up there back on the ranch, and John asks me, why don't you go do some work with Cisco? And Cisco doesn't like people. So doing some work with Cisco meant just sit outside of his area where he's at safe enough distance, and just meditate.
Yeah.
If it sounds woo-woo, maybe it does. But I guess I'm okay with woo-woo. So I'm there probably for a good half hour, 45 minutes, and I'm meditating, and I'm just focusing on him, and I'm like in my own thoughts, and just stuff is coming up for me. And one awareness that I have, that I make up, if you will, is the idea that the reason that Cisco tries to bite people is because he is so used to having a negative reaction that he'd rather orchestrate it himself when he gets that negative reaction than being disappointed because he didn't do anything. And so he invites that negative reaction of people yelling at him or whatever. Not that Ruth would yell at him, but of this, hey, that's not okay to do, by biting at people. I don't know if this is true or not, but in this meditative state that I was in, that made sense. And there's a few other things that came up. And it's about 30 minutes, 45 minutes in, I feel like, okay, I'm done, and I go and have a conversation with John. At that moment, Ruth isn't part of that. And all this stuff about my biological father comes up. And John asks me again, how much of the weight that you're carrying is not yours? And I give him his number of 1/3 or 30%, something like that. And he says, I think it's time that you let that go. And he says, wait for me. He goes and gets Ruth and John take me to a place at this ranch. And it's a place where there's a little memorial for the horses that passed away. So it's a little circle in the ground made by rocks, if you will. And then there are 2 trees that overgrow it that provide shade. And in the trees, there's all these ribbons. And Ruth invites me to cut a ribbon. And I tie a ribbon in a tree. And this is for the first time in my life. I am able to wish my biological father well, wherever he may be. And that's when I break down. And I'm even getting emotional as I'm telling you this. That's when I break down in tears and I sob like a little kid, because now I'm really releasing that anger. I'm really releasing that hold that he had on me for all these years. And I'm able to wish him well. And I said one of my favorite prayers, which is St. Francis' prayer. And that is, again, I'm sobbing like a baby, but letting go of 4 decades worth of anger, 4 decades worth of resentment, 4 decades worth of hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm really feeling lighter. And I think that's the moment that I got to a point where I said, everything that happened, I would not change a thing because it brought me to where I am today.
Wow. I don't think I've heard that part of the story. That's amazing. I mean, there's a bunch of shit that I was going to say about theta states and learned optimism and learned helplessness, but I just think the story in and of itself speaks for itself. And it's absolutely amazing just to imagine that kind of weight being let go of.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of move forward now to sort of the progress of where you're at. I don't know if this was before or after we had met personally in Atlanta, that cold ass day.
So when you and I met in Atlanta is shortly after that time. So really within a week of you and I meeting is when I found out that my biological father died.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that gives you a perspective of the timeline. Your listeners won't know a thing, but that gives you a perspective of the timeline.
Okay. So it feels like it almost feels like an accelerated timeline. Like it's almost like you've lived 2,000 lives in between the last time I've seen you. You know? And also at the last time I seen you, you were still married. Last time I saw you, I was asking you to come on my live show, and you were like, I can't yet because I'm still working with this place, and I don't want this organization to know or see you with your red hair cursing at or whatever it was that you were. What has? Yeah. Go ahead.
No. Ask your question.
Yeah. What has facilitated this? I don't want to even say final step, this beginning stage of your life now, in which you have a completely different job, right? You're your own boss. You're a life coach. You are divorced now. And I would dare to say that you are you have a good sense of what it feels like to be in full power, right? Has this all? I think this is probably a yes, and this goes against our coaching style of saying yes or no.
I was about to say rephrase, but
don't say that shit, man. That's gonna right. I'm going to deliberately ask a yes/no question.
Sure.
Is this the reason why you're a life coach now?
Ooh, good question. The answer is no.
And why? Just to cover my ass.
I started coaching well before this. So I started coaching 5 years ago. And if I'm honest, I probably started coaching when I was like 12 years old or something like that. I was the kid that people would come to and somehow share their problems with me, right? So there are two answers to this. No, actually, the answer is still no. This is not the reason why I'm a coach now. And it is the reason why I'm a damn good coach, right? There is nothing that, and I tell this to some clients, there is nothing that humanity can throw at me that I won't be able to handle. I have experienced the anger and shame and frustration of having broken my own hand. I have experienced the abuse that my biological father put me through, and I've experienced the weight for 4 decades of what that does to me. Does that mean that I can relate to any type of abuse? Absolutely not. But there is nothing that humanity can throw at me that I won't be able to handle because I have a sublime support network, right? I can work with people and support them through their deep and dark stuff. And that doesn't mean it won't affect me, because it will. But then I have my therapist, John, on speed dial, so that I have a way where I can process that, with whom I can process that in a way that is confidential and safe.
Yeah.
So it's what makes me a damn good coach. It's not the reason why I'm coaching. I'm coaching, and it's definitely shaped my direction. But I started this coaching journey well before this transformation occurred.
I would say that it's probably made you a damn good anything. You know, I know you don't. I know you don't have kids that I think have been proven in court yet, but but how do you approach the possibility of being a father in the future?
It's a good question. For about 4 decades, it was scary as hell, the idea of becoming a father, because I was afraid that I wouldn't be a good father.
Yeah.
And at this moment, I don't have that fear. Let me put it that way. Yeah. I'm recently divorced. I am, I think, nowhere ready for a relationship at this moment. But
of course not. It's fucking COVID. No, you can't be in a relationship, even if you wanted to.
And ladies, by the time that this podcast comes out, it's going to be 3 months later. So don't rule me out just yet.
So he will be ready, ladies. Amazing. You've officially turned the host of this show into your wingman.
Dude, you would be a phenomenal wingman, and I would be a phenomenal wingman for you. So.
I'm good, man. I'm gonna be your wingman, dog. I'm gonna be your wingman. But I don't think you're gonna need it. Given before the show goes completely off the rails, we have to go into the bonus round.
Yep.
Bryce, and this is the part of the show where these aren't scripted questions that I always ask. But since you've never heard this show before, this is probably the first time you're hearing this. Yep. We all have revolutions, these upheavals that we have, both internally, whether it be a release or a value that we held on to, and we end up revolting against it because it's the old way, it's a rigid way of thinking. Or we have external revolutions, right? Ones that we lead to help lead a consciousness movement, right? To serve horses who have been neglected, and to relate to them on a theta state level, right? And so I'm curious about your joy revolution, but there's a couple questions before I ask you about your joy revolution. I want to know, after 4 decades. And by the way, when you see his picture, he doesn't look like he's 4 decades old. He's very proud of that when you meet him in person. But after 4 decades, how do you embody joy, man? And so I've got a couple questions about that, and I'd like you to complete the question. There is no right and wrong answer here. So the first question, and there's no long or short to it either. It can be one word, or it can be a diatribe. Right. So the first one is joy tastes like.
Joy tastes like I'm going to butcher your question and give you a different answer. Joy feels like I'm freaking alive. I am connected to my purpose. I am connected to whatever higher power you believe in, but I'm connected through that. I'm connected with the earth, and I am connected to the people that I'm speaking with, and we're jiving. And that's what joy feels like. We're creating something together, and it is powerful, it is impactful, it is transformational, and we do that together. It's a dance. We're creating it, and boy, is it powerful. That's what joy tastes like.
Let's check with the judges. Yes, we will accept that one. Okay, the next one is joy smells like.
Oh man, joy smells like. Joy smells like. Man, this is a hard question. I thought I was going to be done with one. All right, I've got a different analogy. So joy tastes like the salt on your upper lip after running a 13-mile training run in preparation for your marathon. And joy smells like the clothes that you take off, like that, not the old sweat, but the fresh sweat, the feeling of satisfaction.
Yes. The old sweat is not joyful.
No, but that,
like the beginning of mold.
Yeah, no, nothing of that. And just even a day old sweat. That's not what I'm talking. Or a couple of hours. That's not what I'm talking about. It's that I just completed this longer than typical run because I'm building up to something, and it is that what it smells like is that satisfaction of completed. I'm going to step in the shower and I feel really good. I'm tired but accomplished. I feel tired but accomplished. And I think this reminds me of one of my other coaches who used to tell me it's never about the end, it's always about the middle. So I didn't say a marathon. I said the 13-mile training run for a marathon. Right? It's the journey towards. It's not about that end destination.
Wow. Yeah, you did a twofer there. You knocked out two with one.
Cool.
Not bad. You're 3 for 3 right now.
All right.
Joy sounds like
Julie Andrews and The Sound of Music.
Oh, amazing. The hills are alive. Now, the thing is for a bonus, because to me, joy sounds like Andres Valencia singing Queen's We Will Rock You. Do you want that bonus point or not?
Dude, I would not do this to your audience. I can't hold a tune. And Mark, know this, dear listeners. One of my big problems, I can't sing to save my life. I can't hold a tune to save my life. Thanks, buddy.
I have a limiting belief. No bonus question. No bonus for you. No bonus. But it actually may be a bonus for the listeners if you actually believe that it's that bad.
Yep.
Joy looks like.
Joy looks like seeing someone in their power, seeing their magnificence when they are truly doing that things that comes natural to them, that makes them unique, that they're like, well, this isn't a big deal, but you see them in this zone of genius, in this delicacy, intricate way, and you know that you see this, you can observe this, that they are living their purpose in that moment. And it is magnificent to see. That's what joy looks like.
Amazing. Congratulations. You've passed. You've passed with flying colors, gold star, another horse ribbon for you to tie. And so given that, like I said, a revolution in joy can be one internally and one externally or both. When I say to complete my joy revolution I'd like you to declare your joy revolution statement for us.
My joy revolution statement. I'm the founder of the Live Life Deliberately movement, and I take that very seriously. I want people to live their life consciously and intentionally, not in the way that I did for 4 decades, with one foot more on the brake than on the gas pedal, and not really knowing, not taking up space, not giving direction to my life, but truly owning their magnificence, dealing with the shit that's in your bag or in your basement, whatever analogy you want to use, so that it no longer has a hold on you, so that you can show up as your best self and make the contribution in this world that you were intended to make. If I can work with people and support them on that journey, that's my joy revolution.
Andres, it's been a wild ride to be on this short journey with you, coming from volunteers to now being on a show where you've told me to fuck off in public.
With love. With love.
Of course, with love. It stings even more when you say it that way. But I mean, I think back to that time when we volunteered, and it was like we were on the same page, you know. And then you know, I think back to you know, these coaching programs that we were trying to work on together in business projects, and you know, you making me a better salesperson, you know, and coach, and you working on me showing up fully. It makes sense. And I didn't even know your full backstory, but I do remember in Chicago, I don't know if you remember this, but like we were in break and we came together, and I was like, I said, "What's up, brother?" or something like that. I gave you a high five, and you stopped and you were like, you know, I really like that you call me brother, because I haven't had that many people call me that, and I actually feel like they're my brother. I still feel the same way, man. And I hope, I think like true brothers, fuck you back, my friend, with love.
I received that. Thank you.
I received it. Y'all, Andres' stuff is in the show notes. I think when the show comes out, we've got the 5 pieces of growth from, is it Mr. Rogers style? Is that what the official title is?
How I titled it is How to Deal with Setbacks Inspired by Mr. Rogers, because I'm developing this man crush on Mr. Rogers that I did not grow up with. But
well, I'll let Mr. Rogers hold the fort until you see me again with my shaved head, and then you're gonna have a man crush on me because I'm gonna be your best fucking wingman. So, ladies, get on this. Get on this in 3 months from now. All right. So, Drace, I can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Received. And for your sake, for my sake, for shit's sake, for everyone listening, start your revolution in love, in light, in shadows, and in joy. It's your boy, Mark Cordone and Andres Valencia. Take care, y'all. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the Golden Mike podcast. There's more good stuff coming your way. But until the next episode, let's stay in touch, yes? Find us on Instagram as The Joy Rev, or communicate with like-minded revolutionaries in our Facebook group. Search The Joy Revolution Underground. And of course, don't forget to check out the classes, articles, blogs, and some serious fun at joyrevolution.com. That's joyrevolution.com. Now, until then, what will you do to change history for the better? Let's go out and play, shall we? Press start to begin.